I want to talk about how canoe stroke might evolve over time and how you might use it to adapt to your changing body. I've been paddling for 40 years, way more than 10,000 hours on the water, way more than 10,000 miles on the water, and I've had to change it. I mean, initially, I started like everybody else, doing this kind of thing. That's basically just using your arms, and you can't go very fast, and you can't put a lot of power behind it, because if you really try, you're gonna tire out your muscles. Your biceps are pretty small compared to your whole body. Eventually, most people figure out that they should use a little bit of torso rotation. They end up with this kind of stroke. It's not great, but it is better than just using your arms. It's rotating the body a little bit. It's having the paddle far away from the boat, which isn't ideal because it's providing a turning impetus. But you know what? You're using your body. It's better than nothing. Eventually, whether you're doing whitewater paddling, you really need to get a lot of power, or you're doing marathon type paddling and you need to maintain moderate levels of power for a very long time, people evolve to using torso rotation more deliberately. Typically, they're gonna reach forward with that bottom shoulder. They're gonna plant the paddle somewhere around their feet. My feet are right here. Then they're going to uncoil here and basically remove the paddle somewhere around their hip. They're gonna go here, uncoil, and when you watch marathon paddlers, they're gonna go mile after mile after mile after mile. Now, there are a lot of nuances to this stroke. How you plant it in the water, how high your hand is relative to your eyebrows, when you start pulling the paddle out, how you recover. But the point I want to emphasize here is now we're using the big muscles of the body. As I'm using my lats, as I'm unwinding my body, I'm not really using my biceps. I'm using my torso. And my torso is a lot bigger than my body, and I can go a lot faster. Every time I take a stroke, I also push with my feet. If I have some kind of pedal system, or if I can anchor my feet on something. This is true regardless of whether you're using a straight paddle or a bent shaft. A bent shaft, which I like for longer trips, allows you to put that blade in more vertical, and now every bit of power that you generate on that stroke is going into propelling you forward. The problem is, I'm 52 years old. I have rotated like this on both sides hundreds of thousands of times. I've done a whole lot of more damage to my body as well, doing bad weightlifting and doing jiu-jitsu and doing judo. My back has taken a pounding. So I have found that the better my stroke gets, the more I use my torso in this uncoiling motion, the worse my back gets. And that's very discouraging. So on my last big trip, which was up to the Seal River in northern Manitoba, what I found was, instead of powering it with my body's rotation, I could power the stroke a little bit with my body's leaning forward. I would go here, and I'm not gonna move my arms at all. But see, as I lean forward, as I do this little bow, the paddle moves backwards. Now, is that as efficient as this stroke? No, it's not. In part because when I'm doing the traditional rotation stroke, the paddle stays more vertical. When I lean like this, there's a lifting component, and I'm lifting the lake a little bit. But you know what? It's still better than using my arms. A second problem with using a lean to power the boat is in a shorter boat or an unweighted longer boat, you set up a bobbing motion. Every time you go forward, the bow goes down. Every time you go back, the bow comes up. And that bobbing motion isn't efficient. Now, that's something that might really have an effect if you're in a 10-foot play boat. If you're in a little tiny boat, or if you're a very light 16-foot boat that's completely unloaded. Not an issue with a longer boat. This boat is almost 18 feet long. Not an issue when your boat is heavily loaded, because you transferring your weight like this is barely going to make a difference. So that's an example of how you can adapt your stroke over time. Your stroke starts out bad. Then it gets better. Then it starts getting towards the perfect form, the form that's been determined to be the most efficient by generations of marathon paddlers, by generation of whitewater paddlers. And then finally, you have to make allowances for your own body. Maybe your body isn't the exact same shape as some world champion marathon paddler that you're watching. Maybe you've got pre-existing injuries like I do. Maybe paddling perfectly works for a while and then starts exacerbating injuries. So you got to be prepared to work around it. But I have found for myself, at least for tripping, that the leaning style of paddling without too much torso rotation is a pretty good workaround. I will still use the rotational style because it's more powerful if I have to do a front ferry from hell above a big ledge, if I really have to make it into that eddy, if I really have to get a lot of acceleration to get out of an eddy, no problem. I'll use it judiciously. It's a tool that I use, but it's not the only tool that I use. If you have experience working around a different body type or pre-existing injuries to make your paddling stroke effective and efficient, I'd love to hear what your story is.